You're about to watch the Tribune's panel on climate change. But how we decide to transition our energy economy will directly impact each of us. From the products we use to the health of the industries we rely upon for jobs and revenue. Change and transition must be sustainable. UH Energy is at the forefront of working with government and industry and understanding what a sustainable energy transition requires. We'll be here at 9:30 to address your questions, and we look forward to it.
We're here in this company to make the world a better place, and we like to think we're doing it through Tito's handmade vodka.
You're about to watch the Tribune's panel on climate change. But how we decide to transition our energy economy will directly impact each of us. From the products we use to the health of the industries we rely upon for jobs and revenue. Change and transition must be sustainable. UH Energy is at the forefront of working with government and industry and understanding what a sustainable energy transition requires. We'll be here at 9:30 to address your questions, and we look forward to it. You're about to watch the Tribune's panel on climate change. But how we decide to transition our energy economy will directly impact each of us. From the products we use to the health of the industries we rely upon for jobs and revenue. Change and transition must be sustainable. UH Energy is at the forefront of working with government and industry and understanding what a sustainable energy transition requires. We'll be here at 9:30 to address your questions, and we look forward to it. You're about to watch the Tribune's panel on climate change. But how we decide to transition our energy economy will directly impact each of us. From the products we use to the health of the industries we rely upon for jobs and revenue. Change and transition must be sustainable. UH Energy is at the forefront of working with government and industry and understanding what a sustainable energy transition requires. We'll be here at 9:30 to address your questions, and we look forward to it. Just after the panel, Taking Heat, click on the Armadillo Partner Program stage, where UH Energy will lay out a realistic and sustainable energy transition pathway. Hear from both industry and the Department of Energy, and we'll look forward to addressing your questions.
Hi, I'm Erin Douglas, environment reporter for the Texas Tribune. On behalf of my colleagues at the Texas Tribune, I'm happy to welcome you to the 2021 Texas Tribune Festival. I'm excited to have you for our panel on climate change today, Taking the Heat. I'm joined by Dr. Robert Bullard, a distinguished professor of urban planning and environmental policy at Texas Southern University. Also, Katharine Hayhoe, chief scientist for the Nature Conservancy. And Michael Weber, a Josey Centennial professor in energy resources and professor of mechanical engineering at the University of Texas at Austin. Thank you all for being here today. We're going to focus on three themes today: worsening crises in our climate and environment, policies that are and aren't addressing climate change, and the solutions to mitigating these crises, because there are solutions, and hopefully these people know what they are. I'd like to start with a recent crisis, so Hurricane Ida, which has left communities on the Louisiana coast with a devastating aftermath. And so I want to go to Dr. Bullard because you've worked closely on the issue of environmental justice for many years, and especially in recovery efforts after Katrina. So, after a crisis like this, what do communities that have been impacted, marginalized communities that have been impacted, need before, during, and after an environmental crisis?
Well, I think Hurricane Ida is really a challenge, and for those communities that are on the front line of environmental assault and who are economically disadvantaged, it means that this kind of disaster really further marginalizes them. So it's hot, it's humid, no electricity, no food, no water. I mean, it's almost like this perfect storm of what would happen to those communities that somehow have the least means. And so what needs to happen is that resources needs to be rushed to the area for those who have been left behind or who stayed behind. And in some cases, there needs to be some further evacuation of those who, elderly, for example, who are in those houses that may be over 100 degrees, 110 degrees inside if it's 95 outside. And so there has to be a multiple kinds of strategies to deal with getting resources, food, water, in some cases, generators in terms of hospitals, et cetera. So it's almost like you have to think about this as the converging threats in a conditions that's really made more complex by COVID. So this is not an ordinary disaster, if you could ever call a disaster ordinary. It's conditions where communities that have that are still reeling from COVID, that are reeling from lack of resources. In some cases, people are being threatened with evictions. They're losing their income in terms of being kicked off of unemployment. So it's economic, it's environmental, it's health, it's housing, it's transportation, it's all of that.
Right. And in the time that you've worked on equity issues, what are some of the do's and don'ts that you've seen in responding to an environmental crisis like this? What did you see after working with groups after Katrina?
I think we have to understand that when resources flow, oftentimes the resources don't flow toward need. And those who can fill out forms and get access to computers and do their online applications for assistance and loans and grants, et cetera, they oftentimes get in ahead of the line. But for many communities and elderly people and individuals who may not have access to the internet or who may not be savvy about filling out forms, et cetera, oftentimes the money, the funds, the resources are slow. And so what happens is that disaster funding and recovery dollars generally flow toward this formula. Money follows money. Money follows power, and money follows whites. And more affluent communities end up better off after recovery dollars go in, whereas marginalized communities end up further marginalized. And so we have to make this time and each time after, we have to make sure that there are safeguards so that we don't have marginalized communities, disadvantaged communities, communities that have been left out are not further marginalized when we talk about building back. We have to build back better, but we also have to build back fair. We have to look at infrastructure and how infrastructure historically has been a way of dividing communities. Some communities get levees that are strengthened. Other communities are behind the levee. Some communities get mitigation in terms of other kinds of flood mitigation and other kinds of hardening of facilities, whereas others are kind of like left to get in the back of the line. And that back of the line syndrome has created further marginalization and further victimization that's made worse by storms like Ida.
Yeah, and thinking about these, converging threats at the same time, it certainly feels like hurricanes are getting worse, slower, stronger, like we saw with Ida. And so I want to go to Dr. Hayhoe. As a climate scientist, can you tell us, what does the science suggest on how climate change is affecting hurricanes along the Gulf?
Well, climate change is a threat multiplier. The only reason we care about it is because it takes everything else that we are already concerned about, every other problem we're trying to fix, and makes it worse. So everything that Dr. Bullard was just talking about, the disparities in socioeconomic conditions, the disparities in the infrastructure, the disparities in who lives where and what resources they get both before and after disaster hits, all of that is exacerbated because climate change is taking these events that we've always had before, like hurricanes and heat waves, droughts and floods, and it's making them worse. So it's making hurricanes bigger and stronger. They intensify faster and they have a lot more rain. We know, looking back at Hurricane Harvey, that the rainfall during that hurricane was likely about 15% more intense than it would have been if the same hurricane had happened 100 years ago. There was almost 40% more rain than if the same hurricane had happened 100 years ago. And the economic damages were about 4 times greater than they would be if the hurricane had not been supersized by a warming world. So you look at that, more rainfall, more flooding, more economic damages. Who is most disproportionately affected by that? The lower income, the Black and the brown communities. They are the ones who are suffering even more as a result of a changing climate. And that's why to care about climate change, we don't have to be someone who considers themselves to be an environmentalist. We don't have to be someone who considers themselves to be somebody who cares about things like climate change or other issues like that. All we have to be is a human, especially somebody living here in Texas, because we are on the front lines of how climate change is loading the weather dice against us.
Mm-hmm. And, speaking of these environmental crises, another environmental crisis that comes to mind is the winter storm in Texas that caused the collapse of the power grid. And so, are there models that suggest that the winter storm in Texas had anything in relation to climate change? What does the science say on that?
To be totally honest, I wouldn't call these environmental crises because that sort of implies it's about the environment. I would call them humanitarian crises because they affect real people, especially the people who have the least resources to adapt. Right. And that happens right here in Texas, like you just said, with the winter storm and with the hurricanes. And of course, it happens on the other side of the world in Southeast Asia, in Africa, and beyond. So these, when we sort of label things as, well, that's just an environmental crisis, and often people who say, well, I'm not an environmentalist, they're like, oh, I don't care about that. But again, it's not only environmental, it is a power crisis, because of course, one of the first things that happens, I know that Dr. Weber can speak to this, is we lose power. It's a food crisis, it's a water crisis, it's a health crisis, it's a housing and an infrastructure crisis. It's a crisis of everything that we hold dear that we need to survive and thrive. And you're right, we see it coming and going. So we see that droughts are getting bigger and stronger and more intense, but we've also got crazy heavy rainfall events because when storms come along, there's more water vapor for those storms to sweep up and dump on us. Yeah. We see that hurricanes are getting bigger and stronger, but in the winter, we see that our weather is getting weirder too. With the Texas winter storm, we don't have any official attribution on that, but we do know that as the Arctic warms a lot faster than the rest of the world, it's causing the jet stream to do some very big wiggles, which are bringing down some really cold air pockets all the way down to Texas. That's why I think rather than calling it global warming, it makes a lot more sense to call it global weirding, because sometimes what we just see is weird.
Yeah, for sure. And, I want to start talking about policy and solutions here, because I think we all here agree that there's a lot of crises happening with the climate and environment and all these humanitarian issues that we've discussed. And so I know that Michael has told me before that he's a climate optimist. And so I want to go to Michael here because you've spent a lot of time thinking about policy, how the electricity grid can work better and cleaner. But, I was just reading the other day that we would actually need an 8-fold increase in the annual pace of renewable energy deployment if we want to get to 100% clean energy by 2050. And that just sounds impossible. How do we get there, and is it possible?
Great question. And weirdly, I have become a climate optimist recently, despite 40 years of sort of dawdling policies and that kind of thing. And there are a couple of reasons. One, I think the destruction from Hurricane Ida, the destruction from Winter Storm Uri in Texas, Hurricane Harvey, the 2011 freeze and drought in Texas, or the polar vortex of 2014, these big events are taking aim at the energy infrastructure, and they show the infrastructure to be kind of flimsy in all sorts of inequitable ways. And we have to build it back. And as Professor Bullard said, we build back better, we should build back fair, but we got to do something. We got to build stuff back. And as we build it back, it looks to me like there's now consensus we shouldn't just build the same old thing we built 30 or 40 years ago. This is an opportunity to build better options. Renewables are certainly growing, low carbon options are certainly growing. But the reason I become a climate optimist really in the last few months is because of a few different trends that are happening simultaneously. One is the customers are demanding cleaner options. The customers will say, we want the cleaner option. We don't care if there's a price differential. That's really important. So the customers demand it. The employees are now demanding it. The employees are demanding of their companies that they clean up their act and provide cleaner options and also consume cleaner options. And if the employees don't get what they want, they'll go to another company. So to compete for talent, big energy companies, for example, will have to make pledges to get to net zero carbon. Big oil and gas companies, big energy companies. These are people you don't necessarily think of as a leadership position on this from a few years ago, are now making pledges to get net zero by 2050 so they can get the talent. Otherwise, they can't get the talent. And thirdly, we have the investor class now demanding it. Something like a third of all the investor capital out there is ESG capital. ESG is environmental, social, and governance capital. Basically, investors are saying that they have certain standards they want for their investments, either on transparency or labor justice, but also environmental sustainability. And that means there is a lot of money available for cleaner options that used to be available for coal mining. That's no longer available. That means the cost of capital has gone up for oil and gas or conventional projects, but cost of capital has gone down for the cleaner options. So if the investors, employees, and customers are all demanding it, it almost becomes irrelevant what the policies are. The policies can slow it down or accelerate it, but the market has spoken, and I think that's where the investment will go. And I'll tell you that the number of major oil and gas companies and sort of multi-generational wealth families from hydrocarbons who have called me in the last 6 months to say, we know the transition's here. We think the train's left the station. We don't want to be the generation that loses the family fortune, clinging to an idea of how we made our money 100 years ago. What can we do? How can we invest? Where can we put our effort? And so when the investors want it and the people want it and the markets are putting their effort that way, it will happen, at least in a place like the United States and Europe. But then that will create a global supply chain of better technologies that are cheaper for places like Southeast Asia, India, China, you name it. And so I'm at this point, I was like, oh, actually, the solutions are kind of baked in, they exist, and people are going to invest in them. I think we'll get there. And then the next question is, well, how do we not get to net zero? How do we go carbon negative to clean up 200 years of emissions that we polluted in the atmosphere that we have to take back out? So we have to stop polluting as soon as possible, but then we have to go vacuum up the mess we made as well. So I'm in an optimistic mood, and that might be silly given all the policy slowness we've had for decades, but based on the information I have from the last few months of private conversations with people with money, I think something's changed.
Yeah, so you definitely think the momentum is there that we need, but what technology is still necessary to get us there? And do we even need all of that technology to be like 100% there to start this sort of rapid pace of development?
Well, it's sort of like a taxonomy or of logic to this. I say the first thing is efficiency and conservation. The energy you don't consume is the best form of energy. And that also saves money for consumers and is best for the environment and our ecosystems. So efficiency and conservation, and we have a long way to go in the United States. Our buildings are not efficient. Our cities are not designed in an efficient way. Dr. Bullard knows a lot more about that than I do. And of course, our infrastructure has divided cities. So let's quit dividing the cities and make it more efficient. So let's go with efficiency first. Lots of technologies and opportunities there. Second, let's electrify as much as possible. There are a lot of things that we do by burning things that we could do with electricity. In particular, I'm thinking like light duty vehicle transportation, surface mobility for our cars and buses and things like that. Third is let's clean up the fuels and gases. You can't electrify everything very easily. So you need some fuels, maybe for industrial heat, building heating, maybe some heavy duty long haul shipping. Let's clean up those gases with hydrogen carriers like ammonia, something like that. And then fourth is let's clean up the sky. And that could be with soil carbon sequestration, growing new kinds of crops, direct air capture. Let's take the CO2 out of the sky. Let's reclaim the atmosphere to get it back to where it was. kind of like we did with water pollution. The first step in the 60s, 70s was stop polluting. And then we actually went back and cleaned up the water a bit. And the same thing with land pollution. Let's go back and reclaim the land for prairies and grasslands where we can. So let's stop the pollution and then let's go clean it up. So that's kind of the 4 steps in my view. And there's a lot of technologies along the way: wind and solar and storage and geothermal and smart data for controls and efficiency. A lot of things we can do. Let's rethink about where we live, and is where we live close to work or close to where we shop? Or are we going to get in a car and drive 30 minutes? So there's a lot of bigger level regional decisions we need to make, as well as the technologies and components.
Yeah, and I want to go back to Dr. Bullard on policy here, because as we know, when we're designing these technologies or policies in Austin or DC or wherever, that doesn't always align with what's happening on the ground. And so, Dr. Bullard, when we're planning for the resiliency of our cities from climate change, what is the most important for leaders to keep in mind when it comes to equity?
Well, I think it's important to understand that we should never leave planning just to planners. I think we have to build in and bake in communities and get the voices of those who oftentimes are not even in the room, but they have great ideas and they can tell you how things connect. They can tell you how to build a livable city and connect people to place and housing, to transportation, to business, et cetera. They have lots of great ideas. They may not have PhDs or law degrees or engineering degrees, et cetera, but they have PhDs in living and understanding how things work in communities. And so we have to build, this connectivity between our cities, urban, suburban, and rural areas in a way that we don't just leave any place behind. And I think place oftentimes will matter, and we just can't plan everything from DC. We have to have local involvement and participation. That's very important.
Yeah. And are there any examples in your work recently that you can give related to that? I know that you've been working with the Biden administration, and, how are things changing, and, how do you think we're moving forward differently with the sorts of equitable conversations that you're talking about?
Well, when I started working on this ancient 40-something years ago, the whole question of equity and justice as it relates to policy and planning, particularly when it comes to environmental issues, it was a footnote. But now equity and justice is a headline. And so I think the administration has adopted this framework, and one of its initiatives, the Justice 40 initiative, for example, is saying as we move to a clean energy economy and green up our grid and other kinds of development and building out, whether it's green jobs, et cetera, that the equity benefits 40% of those investments should be directed toward those communities that have been left behind, which means infrastructure is more than building roads and dams and highways. Infrastructure also means that social infrastructure, that human infrastructure, and making sure that we invest in that so that we don't somehow have this economic divide, environmental divide, and technology divide. We have to make sure that there is a just transition to that, and not somehow create the society in which there's an assumption that there will always be inequality. I think we have to plan for a just and equitable society, and do that with how we plan, how we do our policy, and how we invest.
Yeah. And, I think that this challenge can feel pretty overwhelming up against all these problems of racism and inaction and the sheer magnitude of the climate crisis. And so I do want to go back to Dr. Hayhoe, because, you're a climate scientist, but you're also a public communicator, especially on hope for solving the climate crisis. I know that you have a book out this month, Saving Us, is about this very topic of resilience and solutions. And so, it often feels like it's too late and that we're certain to fail on solving the climate crisis and doing it in an equitable and just way. How does one counter that feeling of failure, and what should we be doing instead?
Well, as a scientist, I know that some of the impacts are already here today. So it's almost as if we've been smoking a pack of cigarettes a day for years and even decades. There's a few spots in our lungs, there's reduced lung capacity, and that's already here. But we don't have emphysema, we don't have lung cancer, and we're not dead. So when's the best time to act? As soon as possible. By how much? As much as possible. Because it's only too late when we decide it is. Our future depends on the choices we make today. And rather than just plunging blindly into the future, looking in the rearview mirror, which is kind of the way we've operated over the last few decades and even centuries, it's time to look ahead and do what everyone on the panel has already mentioned. Look at what type of future do we want? One where we have clean energy, clean air, efficient use of our resources, where we incorporate justice and equity into our planning rather than seeing what falls out after we're done. We envision that positive future, and then we deliberately head towards it. That's how we truly can, as I say in the title of my book, save us. Now, people might say, well, I'm not a president or a CEO or a celebrity or a deep thinker. What am I supposed to do about this? I'm just a person with a PhD in life, as Dr. Bullard said. Well, that's how the world has changed before. It hasn't changed because some eminent scientist said it had to. It hasn't changed because a president said it had to. The world has changed when ordinary people said, this is not the way it should be. The world can and must be different. And the first thing they did was use their voices to start talking about why it mattered and what we could do to fix it. Join up with others who have the same ideas. Start to advocate for changes at your place of work, your place of worship, your school, your neighborhood, your town, your city, your state. Talk to people about what we can do. Every single person has a role to play. It's not just up to us. It's not just up to the decision makers. It's up to every single one of us because this is our world.
Yeah, and thinking about talking to people, I mean, we all live in Texas. Sometimes it can feel very difficult to have these conversations in a politically divided environment. And so what have you found in your conversations with fellow Texans, in your conversations with people who may not even agree that climate change is happening, that has been successful as you sort of, go on this conversation around, action around climate change?
Well, I'll tell you what doesn't work and what we don't have to do is argue over the science. Because people don't honestly have a problem with the basic science that explains that digging up and burning coal and gas and oil produces heat-trapping gases that are wrapping an extra blanket around the planet, causing it to warm. If they truly had a problem with that same science, they wouldn't use stoves or fridges or airplanes, because it's all the same science. So why do we hear so many sciencey sounding objections? Why do I get them on social media every single day? It's because they are a cover for our real problems. Our real objections are we don't want to fix it. We're afraid that fixing it will negatively impact our personal well-being, our comfortable lives, our economy, the way the world is. We feel like if we fix it, it might somehow rearrange the order of the world and push us further back down the line. But the reality is that climate solutions are good for all of us. They're good for our health. They're good for our economy. They're good for our own welfare and those of our children. And climate solutions disproportionately benefit the very people who are most affected by climate change today at the same time. Climate solutions are justice solutions, they're energy solutions, and they're health solutions. So when we start thinking it from that perspective, we realize that I don't have to engage with Uncle Joe who says it's just a natural cycle. Uncle Joe can just go on saying that if he wants. But what I can do is I can say, hey, did you know that here in Texas, we're already getting, okay, how much of it is, Michael? 22% of our power from wind?
Yeah, wind and solar. Yeah, exactly. A little over a fifth of our electricity comes from wind and solar.
There we go.
If you add a nuclear, it's like a 30% or a third of our power is low carbon.
So a third of our power is low carbon. And what do you think about that? Isn't it awesome that Texas leads the US in wind energy? Do you have a problem with that, Uncle Joe? And then talking about solutions too, I could say, you know what? I have a colleague who moved to Houston and he listened to what I was saying about how flood risk was increasing. So he bought a house that was not outside the 100-year flood zone. It was not outside the 500-year flood zone. He bought a house outside the 1,000-year flood zone to make sure that he was safe. Along came Hurricane Harvey, and sure enough, his house did not flood because he had prepared. So when we talk about sensible things that people can do and sensible solutions that benefit Texas, we can find a lot more in common than we thought that we did. And that's where we can have the constructive conversations.
So starting almost with the solutions instead of the premise.
Yes, because once people get on board with the solutions, I have seen this myself, and I actually tell some really funny stories in my book about this. Once people are on board with the solutions, their sciencey sounding objections evaporate.
Interesting. And just quickly want to go back to Michael, since we started talking about the grid. How do we keep a reliable grid while also transitioning? I mean, this is a big topic right now in Texas.
I think the two things go hand in hand, that transitioning the energy mix will make it more reliable. So if you look at the failures of the grid in Texas, the most energy rich location in the world had energy failures in 2011 and also 2021. We've had other failures along the way. In 2011, the forms of failure first started with coal, where we had frozen coal plants trip offline and a frozen gas supply system. And then we had other problems within the system. But in 2021, it started with gas. Gas froze, and then we had problems with nuclear and coal, and also with wind, and solar did just fine. Hydro actually overperformed. So our gas supply system froze in both those major events, and coal froze in both cases as well. And if you look at our energy mix in the power sector, we were just saying 30% is nuclear, wind, and solar, 70% is fossil fuels, 50% gas, 20% coal, and they're not as reliable as advertised. And so if we can diversify our fuel mix, that should build in more reliability, especially as we add more storage and build a lot of battery storage. And as we build in more demand response, where we turn off non-essential appliances like a water heater or a pool pump, things like that, we can shed demand more cheaply, quickly, and reliably than building new supplier power plants. So I think diversifying the power sector, which is already happening by market forces alone, the cheaper options, wind, solar, and storage, are outcompeting the more expensive, dirtier options. That should build in more reliability, because a more diverse mix is more reliable, because the thing that causes gas to freeze is different than what causes a solar panel to fail and that kind of thing. So if we're too reliant on the same forms of energy, and then that form of energy is not available when we need it, like gas wasn't in 2021, that's a problem. So I think some of these solutions go hand in hand. With Hurricane Ida in Louisiana, there's going to have to be a lot of rebuilding. And if you look at Entergy has fought a lot of the rooftop solar or community solar options. Those options probably look a lot more appealing now when your large transmission towers fall. And if you could have local distributed sources of energy, that would help. So I see a lot of win-win, where the solutions tend to be cheaper, higher performing in different ways, more reliable, or at least fail in different ways, so the same event doesn't cause the whole system to collapse. So it's a big investment opportunity, a big money-making opportunity, and a big reliability opportunity. And then if we take what Professor Bullard says to heart, we should have equity in mind as we do it. If we take what Professor Hayhoe says to heart, which is we should build for the weather of the future, not the weather of the past, I think that would be more sensible overall.
Yeah, and I think we've got about 5 minutes left here, and so I want to take the last 5 minutes to go to each of you and think about, when you think of the big challenge that Texas and the nation has ahead to reduce emissions and to clean up our environments, protect people's health, and do this all in an equitable and just way, this big challenge that we have ahead and that we're already working on, what gives you hope, and what makes you think, like, yes, we will and we can do this? And I think I can start with you, Michael, since we're just chatting about it.
I think let's not build the same thing that failed. Or at least not built the same way. Let's build it better or different options. Let's not use same 1970s thinking. So 1970s, Texas had like half the population, and it happened to be a wetter decade. And so we can't assume water is going to be available for power plant cooling. So we got to prepare for drought. Let's build better stuff. We have newer options. So let's use this opportunity as disasters happen to upgrade and modernize the system. And there are a lot of customers who want it. I think people want better systems, but also the market is providing more technical options and solutions than we had a few decades ago. So I'm pretty optimistic about that. And in Texas, we have a funny habit of often doing the right thing, but for the wrong reasons, which is, I'd rather we do the right things for the right reasons, but sometimes we get the right answer even for the wrong reasons. We've been building wind, solar, and storage pretty quickly, more quickly than just about anywhere in the world, because it's cheap and it's a way to really foster rural economic development. Like, it's good for rural areas and it's good for urban consumers. And that is kind of interesting. We didn't get there because it's drought resilient. We didn't get there because it's good for climate change. It was just the cheaper option. It was just an economic incentive. I like that. When the economic incentive aligns with where we should be going for other reasons, this is a great outcome. So this gives me cause for optimism.
And Dr. Bullard, what gives you causes for optimism in your work?
Well, I think what gives me hope and optimism is to see more and more young people and looking at our demographic shift, and the fact that I'm a boomer. And if you look at Gen Xers and millennials and younger, they outnumber my generation. So I think that whole majority now would be pushing for these changes fast and furious and doing it right in a more equitable way. And I think that's having those numbers will also translate into policies, I think, that can get us there quicker, because we don't have 40 years. And so it's like now the urgency of now is, I think, is taking hold, and that's very hopeful.
And lastly, Dr. Hayhoe, we'll leave you with the final words.
Where do you find hope is the number one most frequent question I've been asked as a climate scientist over the last 4 or 5 years. And we don't find hope in the science, with hurricanes getting bigger and wildfires burning more area and heat waves getting more intense and floods becoming more frequent. But we do see hope, and that hope lies in what people are doing. We see the hope in terms of how quickly our electricity sector has changed here in Texas. We see hope in terms of all of the young people who are rising up and saying, we need change. This is not the way the world should be. I find hope in knowing that here in Texas, we've got the largest Army base in the US by land area, and it's 45% powered by clean energy, Fort Hood. We've got entire towns being powered by clean energy. All of the city of Dallas's operations are clean energy. The city of Houston has a very aggressive climate action plan to meet its Paris targets. Here in Texas, action is happening. And this is what I feel. If it can happen in Texas, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah, and so we're out of time, but I do hope that this conversation has introduced new ideas to our audience about climate equity and resiliency. And thank you so much to our panelists for their time, and to our audience. We hope that you tune in to our other sessions this week. So thank you all for joining us.
Just after the panel, Taking Heat, click on the Armadillo Partner Program stage, where UH Energy will lay out a realistic and sustainable energy transition pathway. Hear from both industry and the Department of Energy, and we'll look forward to addressing your questions.
On behalf of the Texas Tribune, I am absolutely delighted to welcome you to the 2021 Texas Tribune Festival and today's discussion, the unmaking of the Big 12, what conference realignment means for college football in the state of Texas. My name is Cedric Golden. I'm a sports columnist with the Austin American-Statesman, and I am beyond excited to be a part of this great event. Before we get started, I would love to thank Evan Smith of the Texas Tribune for the opportunity, and Statesman Executive Editor Manny Garcia for allowing me to have great conversation with some real heavy hitters in the Big 12. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panelists. Dr. Linda Livingstone is the president of Baylor University. She knows these Big 12 streets very well. She has a doctorate, a bachelor, and a master's at Oklahoma State University, and knocked down a few jump shots for the Cowgirls back in the day. She taught at Baylor for 8 years during the 90s, served as the dean of the business school before taking similar positions at Pepperdine, Love the Beach in Malibu, and George Washington University. She was named Baylor president in 2017. Welcome, Linda.
Thank you so much, Cedric. Glad to be with you today.
And next is Dr. Lawrence Skuvenek. He is the esteemed president of Texas Tech University. Prior to his appointment, he wore several hats on that campus: university provost, dean of the College of Arts and Sciences, chair of the Department of Mathematics and Statistics. Dr. Skuvenek earned his doctorate in mathematics from Indiana University, his master's degree from Texas A&M University, and a Bachelor of Science degree from Phillips University. He's pretty much been a fixture on that Lubbock campus for nearly 40 years, and Texas Tech has thrived under his leadership. Welcome, Dr. Lawrence Skuvenek.
Thank you, Cedric. I'm pleased to be here with you.
Okay, guys, let's just get to it. This is what we're all here for. I've always called the Big 12 conference the little conference that could. Over 20 national championships in about 25 years, and it's the smallest of the Power 5 conferences, but has proven over time that there's not always power in numbers. There's power in quality over quantity. Take a look at this year, national championships, Texas in rowing, men's swimming, women's tennis, Oklahoma in softball, and the big one, Dr. Livingstone's Baylor Bears with Scott Drew winning the first national title in men's hoops. Another banner year for the Big 12, but then we were hit with a bombshell over the summer when you found out that Texas and Oklahoma were leaving the Big 12 eventually, sometime between now and 2025 for the Southeastern Conference. I'll start with you, Dr. Livingstone. Where were you, and what was your immediate reaction to this news?
Yeah. Well, I was, I believe, on campus at the time when I heard the news. And we'd actually had a board meeting of the conference the day before that news broke. And so we'd just been in meetings with President Harris and President Hartzell, I think the day before that news broke, I think through Texas A&M where it was made public. And, you know, I think my initial reaction was disappointment that it had happened the way that it did. Because, you know, were colleagues with these two schools, with their leadership, had worked with them for several years. And you feel like you've built relationships and built trust. And it felt like after that trust had been violated to some extent. So I think my initial reaction to that was disappointment. And then you roll up your sleeves and figure out how you deal with it and how you move forward.
Lawrence, where were you?
I was sitting in my office and I received a text from the director of communications. And my first reaction was, I thought, this is just false news, social media. Like Linda, I was disappointed. I was also surprised. I felt there was a good relationship among the Big 12 members. We liked our structure, the round robin format. We liked the fact that we were dividing the pie in only 10 pieces. We felt we were well situated with regard to the CFP, and even with the possible plans of expansion that would even get better. So this was somewhat of a gut blow.
And, you know, that's understood. And I have to ask you both, and Linda, it's my understanding that you guys are still meeting as presidents, as athletic directors with the people at Texas and with the people at Oklahoma. Did it feel like a back alley deal to you guys, because it came out of the blue and no one saw it coming? Amazing that they were able to keep this quiet in this generation of free flow of information. It only took one secretary to tell her husband and it would have gone viral, but they kept it quiet like a mob movie. It was amazing how that happened. Did you guys feel, I mean, you said it was a gut punch. Did you feel very blindsided? And what were your conversations like with the leadership of those two universities in the days that followed?
Well, I actually reached out to the president of Texas NOU via text, and President Harris called me. And he was very polite and cordial. And at that time, he conveyed the attitude that nothing had definitely been decided. Oh. And but shortly thereafter, we saw the sequence of events unfold. It was disturbing because we had been engaged in conversations earlier in the year about looking at the landscape of collegiate athletics, thinking, do we act preemptively in terms of negotiating a contract? And so we were looking to the future, not realizing they had a very different view of that future.
And I would add to that, Lawrence is the president of the board, chairs the board of the Big 12, and I'm the vice chair of the board. And so within a few days after that announcement, Lawrence and I, along with Commissioner Bowlesby, met with President Harris and President Hartzell to try to understand the rationale, because they really had given no signals to the conference that they were unhappy or that they were looking at other alternatives. And so we really wanted to listen and understand what their motivations were and what was driving the decision that they'd made. And so we had a conversation with them again. It was within a week, I think, of when that announcement came out. And, I don't know that I left that meeting having any better understanding of the rationale or the thinking. There wasn't a lot of transparency or openness at that point in time to that conversation. So it was a very challenging time for us as we were trying to understand what was happening and why, and not really feeling like we were getting a lot of good information about that could actually be helpful to us as a conference.
And Cedric, I think it is probably relevant to this that though we had been in the league for some time working with the other president, there is new leadership at those two institutions. And so we didn't have the kind of relationship with those two presidents as we had previously. And I don't say that in any disparaging way, it's just a fact.
Well, at the Senate committee hearing on the future of college sports, which I wrote in my column, doubled as a Comedy Central roast. I mean, it was, if you read Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, I think those kids that got stoned had it easier than Jay Hartzell. And when I say getting stoned, I'm not talking about smoking anything. I'm talking about rocks being hurled at your head. He was under fire at that thing, and you guys spoke at it. And I know he said he had a conversation with Joe Harris about the climate sometime in the spring, and somewhere along the line, the conversation turned to maybe we look at other options. How shocked are you guys, and I'll start with you, Linda, that right then and there, when you start to have those conversations, I mean, it's almost like you're married and you're attracted to someone else and you're like, I better tell my wife, we got to nip this in the bud. How shocked are you guys that they didn't make those feelings known to Commissioner Bowlesby right then and there, so you guys could start looking at all other alternatives in case they did leave?
Well, I think one of the things that was surprising to us was that they did not inform the commissioner at that point in time. And it's very clear in our bylaws what you're supposed to do if you begin to have conversations with other conferences and want to consider transitioning to a new conference. And I think one of the other parts of it that was challenging, I think we would have wanted to hear their issues and their concerns and to see if there were ways within the conference that we could work through that and keep them in the conference. As you've said, Cedric, as Lawrence said, we've been a very strong conference. We've had great success. We were positioned extremely well to have success in a potentially restructured CFP, and that restructuring is now at risk because of this move of OU and Texas. And so I think we would have felt like there might have been ways we could have worked through some of the questions and issues that they'd had if they had actually given us the opportunity to do that, because I think we would have wanted to try to do that because we are deeply committed to the conference. It's been very successful, and we believe it can continue to be successful.
I would just add to that with regards to the meeting that Linda mentioned earlier, when we did meet with Joe and Jay that day via the Zoom, we did raise the question, what could we do additionally? What might we do differently to make this league a viable option for you? And we never really received an answer. That's my recollection, Linda.
That would be accurate, yes.
Yeah, it just felt like they were out of there by then. The elephant in the room, ESPN's fingerprints are all over college sports. You had President Hartzell during his 90 minutes on that Senate hot seat insisted to that hearing, that ESPN's billions of dollars were and the influence were not part of this decision. I know Commissioner Bowlesby launched a few grenades at ESPN's direction when the news broke. Do you guys buy that Disney had its hands out of that pot, and how difficult does it make your dealings with the ESPN, knowing that you're still in business with them, but their $3 billion deal with the SEC is much bigger than the one with the Big 12. So how difficult and uncomfortable will that make doing business with them moving forward?
Linda, why don't you take that?
You're lucky, Linda.
Yeah, thank you, Lawrence. No. I don't know all of the details of what happened behind the scenes with that. I mean, clearly ESPN had a role in that. The two schools did, the SEC did. How that happened, the timing of that, I guess I'll leave to someone else to figure all of that out. I think what our responsibility is now is to look to the future of the Big 12, to look at what is in our best interest to strengthen the conference, to ensure that we continue to have the role that we've had in college athletics as a Power 5 conference, as a major player in the CFP, and to position ourselves really well when those next media rights conversations come up in a few years. And I believe we're committed to doing that. And whether that's working with ESPN or someone else, we will do that. And we will have a very strong product for the marketplace that will be producing great athletic events across our men's and women's sports.
All I would add to that, Cedric, is that we don't exactly know what was said. It becomes a he said, she said sort of conversation.
Absolutely.
And to Linda's point, I think we need to be looking forward. And I really think the most appropriate title for this event would be the remaking of the Big 12.
Love it. Love it. I love it. You mentioned the grant of rights agreement and ESPN's possible, ESPN's involvement because they're going to be a player in college football for as long as we're here, of course. I do know that Bob Bowlesby did say at the Senate hearing that Texas and Oklahoma basically account for 50% of the Big 12's TV revenue, according to reports. The school's share of that money would be cut from $28 million to $14 million, with 8 teams. The grant of rights agreement expires in 2025, and those schools left because they believe they could get more money in the SEC. Looking forward, starting with you, Lawrence, where does that leave the Big 12 schools, whose bottom line will obviously take a hit if we're not talking about expansion?
I don't say this to be critical of Bob, but I don't believe it was particularly helpful to come out and say we're going to lose 50% of our market value. I think that we are losing a substantial amount. It might be less. And I believe that it's important for the Big 12 to construct a very positive and visionary message about our possibilities. And we will obviously lose 2 marquee programs. But I think as we look for expansion, we need to look for partners that will maximize our revenue, but also excite our fans. And there are possibilities for doing that, and we've begun down that path. So to the point Linda made earlier, this is about focusing now on getting the Big 12 in the best possible place we can be. And we have something no Group of Five conference has. That's Power Five status. And that is something many schools would desire in their league affiliation.
Well, Lawrence, I'm glad you mentioned that with Texas and Baylor being out of, Texas and Oklahoma being out of that mix, does it imperil your Power Five status, and what needs to happen to retain that Power Five status, which is such a great weapon to have in the areas of recruiting, in the areas of viability, exposure, merchandising, all of the above? What has to happen for you guys to maintain that Power Five status?
I don't know the exact process by which that designation is granted, but I do believe that even if you look at the statements made regarding the alliance of the Pac-10, 12, and ACC, they said the Big 12 matters. And I think the general landscape sees that they need a vital Big 12. And I think with the proper additions, we have a good chance of retaining that status, and that is our intent. Linda, what would you add?
Yeah, the Power Five, or it's really autonomous five status, is the language. It's part of the governance structure of the NCAA. And so it's embedded in the way governance works within Division I of the NCAA. So it's fairly significant in the way that was created to begin with. And so it would take something fairly significant to change that structure within the NCAA. So I think it's very secure right now, and it's certainly something we're committed to retaining. And again, as Lawrence said, as we really think about what the next phase of the Big 12 looks like, we're committed to building that strength and ensuring that status continues to be a part of the conference and the strength that the conference provides and the competitiveness across college athletics.
Well, Larry, you mentioned the alliance, and it's an interesting point. The Big 10, the Pac-12, and the ACC announced this week that they formed the alliance, which is basically a block of 41 schools formed for political and voting clout. The ACC commissioner did come out and say that the Big 12 is important to college athletics, and he wants the Big 12 to do well. But why isn't the Big 12 included in the alliance? If they love the Big 12 so much, why didn't they include you guys in this alliance?
That is a very reasonable question. And I spoke to a president in the ACC and asked that question. And I think his answer reflects what was said in the announcement of the alliance. It's a very informal agreement. I think they called it a gentleman's agreement, nothing in writing. And possibly, I'm only surmising here, that because of the presence of Oklahoma and Texas in our league, this could be a point of contention with them as they're thinking about how they come together.
The other thing I would add to that, I think within that there were some discussions about the potential decisions that will be made about the CFP, where those conferences might have some alignment on what they think that should maybe look like going forward, or the timing of that might be different than in the past. And I think even related to how their members engage with one another, but there's not a lot in it that's specific about scheduling or anything. And we certainly within the Big 12 have games scheduled across those conferences over the coming years. And so in terms of the impact it will have on the Big 12, I think it's minimal at this point in time in terms of noticeable impact in any way. And again, I think there was a lot of support from some of those statements for the conference and the success of the Big 12, which we appreciated and certainly would agree with.
Cedric,
yes.
You mentioned 41 voting, a block of 41 votes. I would just add that in my conversation with that one president, he said, I don't see this as a piece of the future governance of the NCAA. What is more important is what comes out of that new constitutional committee that the NCAA has formed, in which President Livingstone will be a member of that committee.
Excellent. I want to ask you guys, I'm so glad you brought that up. The super conferences seem to be on the way, and it seems like everybody's starting to crowd up together, you know, set big powers and numbers. The SEC's expanded. Pac-12 announced that they're not going to be expanding, but you just know that with the great schools that are in college athletics, that they see what the SEC is doing, and it's basically a copycat league. I want to ask you guys, have there been conversations among the presidents, not including Texas and Oklahoma because they're leaving, about the possibility that if a Pac-12 or a Big Ten or an ACC decides that we want to come for a Baylor, we want to come for a Texas Tech, and are interested in them joining, is there a process whereas you guys will be transparent about it and inform the others? Look, the ACC reached out to us because you don't want to go through what you just went through with Texas and OU.
A couple things I would say in regard to that, Cedric. One, it's pretty clear right now that none of these other conferences have any intent, at least in the near term, to do expansion. So I think those kinds of conversations are not the ones that we'll likely be having with our colleagues with those conferences or with those colleagues in our conferences. The conversation more within our conference with the 8 presidents is around how we build the strength of the conference over time. If the decision is to add some schools, which ones make the most sense, would add the most value to the conference to position us really well as we go for the future. I think we've got good collaboration across the presidents. We're working well together. I think a lot of consistency in the way we're thinking about some of these issues, and we'll certainly continue to build that over time as we look to the future of the conference.
You might recall that it was announced that Commissioner Bowlesby did speak to the commissioner of the Pac-12 about some sort of scheduling alliance that didn't go anywhere. And I believe our mindset has changed in recent days with the Pac-12 saying we're not going anywhere. People in the SEC have said 16 is what it's going to be. And it's possible that there's a sense we need a period of stability and calm. So in some ways, this is advantageous to us in the Big 12. We have some time. Texas and Oklahoma will be members of this league, supposedly for 4 years, and we can move forward very intentionally and make the right additions. And maybe 12, maybe 14. I'm not so focused on these super conferences, but then again, who knows what's going to happen in 2 years? I could be totally wrong.
On the super conference, on the super conference question, I know the move of OU and Texas to the SEC has caused a lot of stress in the system and concern that it might not actually be good for college football. And so I do think it may cause people who had been having all this conversation about super conferences to step back and go, well, would that really mean for college football if we did have super conferences? And is it really good for college football broadly or not, or would it just be good for a small number of schools? So I think it's caused us maybe to be a bit more introspective than we would have been if this hadn't happened about what the best structure is, not just for the NCAA more broadly, but for college football particularly.
And to go, Linda, I think that brings up the issue of antitrust issues. If we're looks like we're in cahoots with one another, we're already under the microscope, and I think right now we'll be probably looking, just as you've said repeatedly, just strengthening the Big 12 and doing it in a way that really shows the value of what we have, and we have a lot.
Well, during that Senate committee hearing, Linda, your athletic director, Mac Rhodes, is just an excellent AD. He said that his athletics department operates at 48% of Texas's budget. I know there are plans to build a $125 million arena on campus. I love me some Farrell Center. Don't get me wrong. I've spent a lot of time in the Farrell Center. That's
it's
a beehive.
Been good to us.
I love the Farrell Center. I love those guys that sit right behind the media and take pictures of us and make fun of us on Twitter. I love it. I absolutely love it. You guys represent two of the four founding schools from Texas in this conference, and there are some cities that are going to be economically directly affected. The Pyramid Group reported that Waco, Fort Worth, and Lubbock could take a hit of nearly 600 million annual gross and lose nearly 8,000 jobs with these two teams leaving. So my question to you are, those are some really crushing numbers, and there are people and families affected. Does that kind of make you feel like maybe it's definitely time to expand? And if Texas and OU leave early, that it might be good to bring in a Boise State, a Memphis, a BYU, Central Florida, Houston, you name it, because I know your phones are going to be ringing. People want to play ball with the Baylors and the Texas Techs of the world. So what do those kind of numbers do when you look at the future of what's going to happen with the Big 12? First, you, Lawrence.
Well, I'm familiar with those numbers. I don't know how exact that analysis was. And it's not as if on 2 Saturdays, we're not going to have a game. Somebody else will be in the stadium playing Texas Tech. And so I know that's caused a lot of concern among the business community. That's why we have to have a viable addition to the league. I don't think 8 is going to cut it. And there might be some impact, but my concern is more focused on the impact to the TV revenue and our future TV contract. And I don't say that to be insensitive to the businesses, but I could almost assure them we're going to have a product out there that's going to still create the same sense of excitement we have right now.
Yeah, and that analysis, it was done very quickly because we had a very short window for that.
Yes,
but
yes.
And there were 2 different analyses done. One was if only the 8 schools remain in the conference, and the other was if it sort of folded and we all sort of dispersed in other places. So I think it was in some ways kind of a worst case scenario. And we are all obviously deeply committed to our communities, and particularly Texas Tech and Waco. We're kind of big fish in smaller communities, and so we matter a lot economically in the communities that we're in, and our athletics programs matter a lot. So we recognize the decisions we make and the things we do have a huge impact on the communities that we live in and are positioned in. And I think, as Lawrence said, the TV revenue is in some ways what matters the most. But we do recognize the impact on the community as part of the reason that rebuilding the Big 12 and making it stronger and continuing having a conference based in Texas, having the 3 schools remaining here in Texas, TCU, us, and Texas Tech in the Power 5 matters to the state and to our communities, as well as to the other communities across the Big 12. And I think the other piece of it is that we recognize the value of our conference. I mean, Texas is one of the best states to recruit any type of athlete, but certainly football players in the entire country. So we are very attractive in many ways. We have some of the biggest TV markets in the country. So there's a great foundation for continuing to strengthen the conference. We're very attractive for other schools that we might want to consider at some point from an expansion perspective. So there's a lot of opportunity for us. And as Lawrence said, it's really about remaking the conference and building it for the future.
Cedric, Linda's touched on a very important point. Texas now has 5 power conference schools. Let's all admit that Texas is the king of football in the United States. The state of Ohio and Florida, they're important, but not as important as Texas. And we've tried to make this point to the governor and the lieutenant governor in our meetings that it is important for the state to retain this special position in college football, not just for the recruitment of athletes, but when you look at the number of high school students that leave this state to go to college elsewhere, and we've looked
staggering. It's staggering.
And where do they go? Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Arkansas. Now they're going to be going to Oklahoma. We can't have that.
We cannot have that. And what I've gotten from this wonderful conversation is the Big 12 is not going away. there is fight in Lubbock, there's fight in Waco, there's fight in Fort Worth, the Little Apple, Lawrence, you name it, Stillwater, good movie, great school. So I have been really, I've been really pleased, really blessed to be here with you guys today. Thank you for such great conversation. And thank you guys for joining us for what we just renamed the rebuilding of the Big 12. My sincere thanks to Dr. Lawrence Skuvanek and Dr. Linda Livingstone. Thank you guys for joining us. And we'll see you at the games this fall.
We look forward to seeing you, Cedric.
Thank you very much, Cedric. It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.